Thanks for joining us for virtual tourism. This is a newer talk in this series, just in terms of how many times we've given it. So the jokes may fall flat or they may be totally amazing. Um, I'm Tassie Gniady. This is the second to last event in our workshop series this semester. Next week is hands-on, although there is some hands-on today as well, with sort of XR affordances, which is the new cool way to refer to augmented reality, virtual reality, and 3D things all at once. So like the X Games, right? We're super into XR. So I'm Tassie. Matthew Mercer will be helping me out with this presentation, and Katie Chapman helped all of us sort of, so we were wrangling content and stuff like that. Really? Katie might, there we go. If you want to follow along, here is a box link. We can also give it to you later. So all the slides will be there. And like I just said, there's a hands-on next week. So this is the limestone tour. We got sort of brought into this by the Indiana Geological and Water Society in preparation for the annual Geological Society of America meeting was in Indianapolis this year. And there is a tour on campus that you can take right now called the Limestone Tour, in which they will tell you about all things limestone and all the buildings. And it's like a 2.5-hour tour, just like Gilligan's Island. And there's multiple reasons why you might want a virtual version of it. A, you're not physically located at IU Bloomington and you would like to get a sense of what this tour involves, or you miss campus. B, maybe you are a physically disabled person for whom a 2.5-hour standing tour, and I had really bad Achilles heel issues at the time. So, I mean, I'm certainly not super physically disabled, but this might not be possible for you. 3, there's also ways in which like this detailed inset here is really hard to see from the ground. So that you can add extra details to something that someone may already be doing. They've noticed with a lot of these that are sort of virtual tourism labeled. Some of them are places you might never be able to afford to go, like Angkor Wat. Others are sometimes pre-gaming because you're finally going on your trip of a lifetime, right? And you want to like sort of get yourself set up for when you go to Angkor Wat. Absolutely. I went too fast. Sorry, folks. Okay, so this is actually one of the ones that I like because I love primates. That is, it's an expedition, and it has also another affordance that I thought was really cool if you're teaching your students about Gombe Park. So here you can see the chimp with on her back, and then it has a beginner question, intermediate question, advanced question. So you can see how it could be a pedagogical tool. So you're not just teaching your kids about primates, right? Like in this sort of like, here's a picture of a chimpanzee, like this is what chimpanzees do, like that it's a little more interactive, and here's like a gibbon on a beach, and then you have questions about, oh no, baboon, sorry, baboon, gibbon. So what are the baboons doing? Why are they all spread out like this? Maybe there's some other things. So they certainly have educational affordances, which is something we're really interested in, is how can these be used in a classroom, which is one of the reasons we chose the tool that we did, fairly easily. So here's a presentation outline. I just sort of gave our introduction. I'm going to talk about, or Matt's going to talk about planning the tour, capturing 360 photospheres, and post-processing. And then I think I'm going to take back over about creating and publishing and those kinds of things. So I'm going to hand it over to Matt right now.
Thank you. All right. I hope my voice is not too low. All right. So what is a 360 tour? Basically, a 360 tour is capturing scenes in a 360 photosphere for like simulating each location that you're looking at, or maybe like a room or an outdoor location. And it also can be used, or you can also use multimedia features, including audio, text, and other still images that can like add some more insight into the tour. And then you can view these 360-degree tours by viewing it on computers, phones, virtual reality devices, headset-mounted devices, whatever you can get on the computer and you can find it on those. Some uses for 360-degree tours are for using it for academic research, historic preservation, prototyping, tourism, real estate, and maybe a little bit of marketing as well to help with, maybe you're doing something with like a house and you're trying to like show them like the features of it or something like that. Well, as Tassie was saying a little bit earlier, we did find some problems with another tour software that got bought out by GoPro. And so we ended up realizing that one of the easier tour softwares that we used was Google Poly, which also uses Google Tour Creator. They're both basically the same thing. They're interchangeable. Well, all right.
So Google Tour Creator feeds right into Google Poly. Google Poly can have low quality files in it. So there are multiple ways.
Yeah.
It's okay. So Google Tour Creator is used to create these things that are then loaded into Google Poly, but Google Poly also lets you build sort of low poly 3D animations even. So there's a number of things on Poly if you ever just want to go surf, like type in turtle and see what comes up. Because I used that one day when I was like building an augmented reality thing. So.
And it's free to use if you have a Google account. And it doesn't require any like knowledge of coding. It's really just a drag and drop type of thing. And it's easy to edit, publish, and share. And some limitations of it is that you can only use smartphone viewers to view in VR, which Google Expedition's trying to work and update on some things, I believe, for getting these on like the Oculus Go or the Vive. And then some other limited features is you can't have web links in it. You can't have map embeds in it. Like you can't show a map on the side of the tour showing exactly where you are. And you can't have any location spots being like, so it's very linear and it's not, you can't go to a different area if you want to go. Like if you see, like let's say you're standing in Franklin Hall and you see the student building. If that's not next, or if it's not you can't point to it and go to it. It's a linear thing. And that's Google Poly. And then also it takes JPEGs and PNG photospheres, and it only takes MP3 audio. That doesn't take any video. And one more thing is that you cannot change the cover photo when you start. Oh, you cannot change the cover photo when you start the tour. Once you get off the first screen, it's basically over. We made that mistake and now we just have the same cover photo. So when you're thinking about identifying scenes for capture, you have to decide who's your audience basically and why they would care about this tour, what's important about it, what's significant about it, what message are you trying to convey? And then you brainstorm some of the locations that these people would want to see and creates a very great and interesting 360-degree tour. And then also consider where your location is going to be. Is it indoors? Is it outdoors? Is it going to be a little bit of both? And if it's outdoors, then you got to think about, is there clouds outside? Is it going to be raining? Is there people who are walking around? Like these are things that you might, if you're a perfectionist, you might not want any people in your tour. That it's really up to you. And then also, if it's like way too much light, then it ends up messing with the camera lenses and would create red dots around, and you might have to go into Photoshop to do some extra touching up on that. And then if it's indoors, then you have people it's a little bit of like walls, like if this is in my way, that might be a problem. And then I actually had a problem with one guy who actually just came up to my camera and he was like, what is this? And I'm like, it's a camera that I'm taking pictures with. Can you please get out of the way? And he's like, are you the media school? I'm like, no. So these are the problems. You just have to deal with some humans and walls. And so when I was planning the tour, we actually, when we were working with the IGWS, we created an Excel sheet to get more of what they want us to add with it. What type of insets, what type of still images they would want. If they want any audio, want me narrating. We tried it, but it didn't work really. And then also just other things like the detailed pictures on the buildings, maybe something about like rustification. And that's something that you have to really plan right before, so you know what you're going to do before you can capture the photospheres. Deciding on the text is very important, and that can mean what's the title of this, what is this called, but also what are like some captions for the photos. How do you want to describe this photosphere? Like, what's the story you're trying to convey here? Having that text is very helpful, so you can show the audience something that they might not know from just looking at it. And then also just understanding, what does this mean in the big picture of this whole tour? And then deciding on the inset adds that extra step. You want to add more to it. There's something more that you want from it. And so that's adding those static images. Showing more detail with what you wanted to show in the photosphere, but might not even be shown in the photosphere. It might be off to the corner. It might be like slightly off. It might be inside. So these images might help and even add more to it. In audio, we did things on this where we even had some sounds of the environment to really give you that virtual feel, that real feel. Now, when it came to choosing our cameras, it was more, I started with the Ricoh Theta just to scout a little bit more, because this is a way easier, way cheaper camera. And it was more just used to see what I want to do with this tour and how we wanted to capture it. The Views is a great camera as well, but it also had some limitations and some problems that didn't seem to help with this tour. And then also it wasn't really available to me as well. But the Insta360 Pro, even though it's a very expensive camera, it definitely has some great results when you actually use it. And some of the big things that change or show like what are the differences of these things, obviously price. That's obviously a big thing, because I mean, if the Ricoh Theta is under $200 and then the Insta360 Pro is $3,500, you just have to really think about where your budget is for that. And then the resolution is fairly well for the Theta with the 1080p HD resolution, but it does only capture those monoscopic 2D photos and videos. But also it does stitch for itself. So you don't have to stitch, you don't have to do any extra post-processing after you capture it. When it comes to the Views, that's 8 lenses of better field of view. So you do get a lot more out of the photospheres than maybe the Theta. And then it also captures a 4K resolution for photos and videos. And then lastly, the one that I used was the 6 lenses of the Insta360 Pro. And that actually can capture either 4K or 8K. And it can change from actually HDR or just normal, the 4K or 8K. And it actually gives you the option if you want to do monoscopic or stereoscopic, or which is basically 3D, and maybe be even able to put it onto a IQ wall where you're able to see it in 3D. So that's why I love the Insta360 Pro. And then taking the photos, these were basically just normal things that I had to learn from kind of being a photographer, but being a 360-degree photographer, is that you have to use a tripod that's around human height, because it's just kind of weird if it's like a little too tall, because you're like, I'm not this height, this is like I'm floating. And so I thought about around the average height, around like 5'5", and then just get out of the photosphere, just like move out the way. I had to do some very creative things when I was on campus hiding, and some of them I failed, but some of them I did pretty well. And then you keep a good distance from the object or the main point of interest that you were, yes? Did I, he asked if I used a timer. I was able to use a timer. I figured out about the timer later on. And because I was over at the student building and that part, I wanted to get a good glimpse of the clock and everything like that. And so the closest thing was like a good walk away. So I just dropped the timer because I used an iPad. So I capture on an iPad. It's connected to it has an app. Sorry. Yeah, so the iPad's the thing that I actually like mess around with the most to take the pictures, maybe mess with the exposure a little bit and change it to 4K, 8K, 3D, 360 degree video photo. That's what the iPad does for me. And yeah, so basically I put the timer down and I like ran to a tree behind it, and that's how I usually did that. It's a funny thing, but nobody really paid attention. And then if you're inside, just try to get your camera, like I said earlier, away from, like, this is way better to have your camera here than like right here, because that's not capturing anything. Be aware of your environmental and your lighting. Like I said earlier, just make sure if there's too much clouds, it might look bland, it might look kind of sad. But if there's like too much light, then there's all these red dots all over the place, and it's kind of glaring off your camera lens. But that perfect, like, partly cloudy day, that's a sweet spot. And if you're using a more expensive camera, like I said, I'm able to change the exposure on the Insta360 on that app, on that iPad, and then running around trying to find myself a place to hide. And there's also this problem, which why you asked about the timer, is that I had to go a little too, if I went too far, then the Wi-Fi connected to the camera would turn off. So basically, I basically like kind of where that distance is. I never like pulled out the ruler that. It's something that I know can go that far because the tree's there. So I'm going to set the timer away. And so you just take the photo and it's that first photo sphere. And so here's kind of a demonstration we did by the Cyberinfrastructure building. And that's me trying to hide. It's okay. Yes.
It used to be with the views that you could only install software. Is that true?
So you asked if the views software still has limited amount of licenses, basically. Yeah, actually, I was talking to Chris today about that, and they still do have limited licenses. So we didn't, because I was actually working on something that we were going to put onto the knowledge base about advanced media, and he said the views is actually not a viable option, honestly, because of the license problem. So yes, that is still a problem.
Is that an issue with the Insta360, or is it a little bit more flexible?
Oh, it's a lot more flexible. I mean, if you're going to spend all that money, they better be flexible. But good question. Yeah, that's definitely a problem with the views. So now, once I've gotten all these photospheres and captured everything, I go into post-processing and get into everything that I need to do, stitching, starting with the downloading. And you just you upload it onto your computer, and then you put it in a folder that's with the pre-established naming convention. Don't getting it confused, like making sure you have like a pretty organized folder for your captures. And if you want to do camel case, that's fine. If you want to do underscores, that's fine. But make sure it's not too confusing for yourself or for whoever's working with you. And then I'd say it'd be best if you put it into like Box, since I believe most of us are IU employees or IU students. So using Box will definitely help with just having that backup, or even just be in there and not even putting it on your computer, just to save some space. And I've been talking about like stitching a little bit, and I feel like some of you, I've lost you a little bit. But basically, like when you're taking these pictures, they take 2D pictures at the beginning because they're, or except the theta where it stitches is already. So the Insta360 Pro, it basically gives you a software that you can put all these photos. They put it in a folder and they give you all these photos. And so they're like, just add these things, put what options you want to do. If you want to have it monoscopic, make it monoscopic. If you want to be stereoscopic, make it stereoscopic. And it all stitches together and to make that photosphere. Because they start out as photos, but they become this photosphere. I'm so sorry. They become a photosphere. And then, like I said, if you do have that problem with red dots, it was a little too bright, even if it's a partly cloudy day, the sun might just beam in and you didn't, it's the world, we can't control it. And you can fix that easily on Photoshop and just cleaning it up or erasing it. And then try to remove your tripod off the picture. I think it's not as appealing to have a tripod just there as you're looking down. It looks really weird. But if you have like a patch or even just nothing there, like, oh, a patch is basically like, it's basically like putting like a picture on the bottom, like a circular picture that kind of like hides a tripod or hides like the little like mess that might be on the ground from your Photoshop editing. And so that, which would be great if you guys wanted to use like something like a patch and you can like a circular picture from either your like company or some group that you're working with. And so that would be great. Just try not to have a tripod. Hi. Sorry, I didn't hear you. Uh-huh. So what I did is there's like this, what is it, free-form selection or something like that, where it's able to, it will like choose. And so like I'd invert the selection and then it would go into only the circular part of it. Yeah, so his question was for like a rectangular equity or equitable, rectangular. Yeah, unfold it into like a rectangle. And what I said was basically that there's a way that you can select between the rectangle. Yes. So then you put those processes down, everything's stitched, everything's ready. It's time to do the fun part and go into creating a tour, which I'm going to pass it on to Tassie.
So at this point, we had sort of asked for all the features that folks were wanting. We had a spreadsheet, so we knew what to put in, and we knew we wanted to create this tour. And so you go into Google Poly, and as Matt said, we were like, because you have draft and you're able to change all these other things. This cover picture, which literally is what people will see before they go into your tour, so you kind of want it to be enticing. And I know this kind of may seem like a duh moment, so you kind of want to pick a nice one. And so we didn't pick a super nice one for the official Limestone tour. And aside from redoing all our work, at that point, we just left it. I also love this one. So you can fill out all the things. And yeah, this is where you upload your picture. And then it's literally as easy as drag and drop. And it will go ahead. So you put a 360 image and it'll wrap it. So as we were just talking about equirectangular, where it's unwrapped and it looks really funky, and I can show you an unwrapped one in a sec, it'll go ahead and wrap it for you. And then you have choices. So you have the scene, and you can say what it is. You can say where it is. You can have credits, and then you can have audio if you want. So we do have audio. Is it which building that has the? It is the student building that has the bell. So yeah, you just want to sort of think about this. And we demoed some sample narration with the scenes, and the GSA decided, or the IG Indiana Geological Waters, IGWS, decided that for this tour, they didn't really need the narration. But again, if you're thinking about multiple affordances for different people, if you don't, also text is weird in VR. You don't want to go text heavy ever. You don't want to ask people to read a lot of text. So if you have a lot of information you might want to convey, and this could be a pedagogical choice, you may want to have narration for your scenes. And then you can add points of interest. So out in front of Maxwell Hall, or Franklin, sorry, out in front of Franklin Hall, there's the statue of Bernie Pyle. And we're going to have a sculpture on. So Bernie literally sitting like, on a box at a typewriter with a, like at war. So that's pretty cool. So that was the other thing, we were able to do temporal, to add some temporal elements. So it wasn't just details that you might be able to see as a person. And one of the other buildings burned in a fire. And so we have a picture pre-fire, and then we have a picture of it on fire. So that was really, I mean, like, so that's again, like things you could talk about during a tour in person. And then, or like people were sort of multimediaing. There is this new trend in tour giving, right, where you give in like an augmented reality, like you use your phone, right, to sort of add extra to people in person. Where so many other notes that our clock doesn't match the time shown on. So I have to go back right thing. I know, right? It's like scripts, like it's like the Star Wars things, right? When Luke gets out of the X-Fighter and he like turns to Leia and he says, "Carrie," because at that point they were dating, and like he just, and it's in there. So if you ever want to see it. So if you publish and you want to view this tour, we've talked a little bit about this. So you push the publish button, and you can choose public or unlisted. And so if you're not ready, like we had stakeholders who are obviously not us. We wanted to make sure they were happy with everything, especially since this was going to be going to such a high profile event. So we kept it unlisted and just sent the link to them. Yeah, Mary. Oh, that's a great question. No. So what we did, our hack, oh, I'm sorry. The question was, can multiple people edit it? Because we think Google is like the king, the queen, Bickerfield. The queen of multiple folks editing a document and doing things that collaborate. So what we did is we used tour at IU. We set up a Gmail account for the password. And so then we just had to be careful in there at the same time because we could over changes or free. So my suggestion is thing. Hi, cover. Okay. I need like a Beyonce microphone. Yes. Right. And especially given how much I move, like clearly that's what I need. So once it's published, it'll show the link and an option to view it then. And I would absolutely recommend like, you know, sort of taking that first, just the same way when you have a paper or anything, taking a look at what you've done. So here's our really delightful cover photo, which is a non-wrap. So we were talking about, remember how things are not wrapped? See, this is an unwrapped. Oh no. Oh, okay, wait, let me go back one. So if you're viewing on desktop or mobile, again, you want to have enough screen real estate though, that like, it actually kind of makes sense on a mobile thing, but it kind of, the desktop can be a good way to have multiple people sort of interacting. And you can view them by pressing a button on the bottom of the right-hand screen. So when you're in Cardboard, you'll have to, and we'll teach you about this ray finder in VR. Like basically, you have to think about there's going to be this dot, and once you're sort of aimed at the dot, it'll let you know, and that's how you click on it. And it's not as intuitive as you'll notice we also have another thing to show you here. These are Oculus Go's. So this is the lightweight version of an Oculus Rift. It is fully self-contained, obviously, like there are no cables, which is kind of awesome. That being said, there are limitations to having your entire processor be right here, right? There's a reason that a Rift or an HTC Vive has all those cables that attach it to a big beefy machine. But it does have a navigator. And so I think there are some ways in which that can be more intuitive for people. So what we did here was we had thought about the Rosewell House, and they had these introductory sort of things that they wanted to show, and so we sort of put them up in the well house. So Matt did this all in Photoshop. And so there's some of these historical pictures. You can see over here that here are some of the limestone sedimentary things. All of you, just thank you. Oh my God, nicely done. The stratigraphic column, I totally knew those words, of limestone. And then there's another one, which I wish the resolution were a little bit better. It's a blow up of limestone, so you can see all the little critters that go into making it. And that's the only one I would love to have like a better detail on, or maybe there's a high contrast version of that somewhere. I don't know. And then we did take cardboards to this event. And the only thing about these, if you've ever used them, is you can, they're still $20 a pop, which is funny because like this is like $20 a pop. So the trigger wears out is my experience. So if you're using it again in a classroom, I wouldn't expect to get more than a year out of it, if that. So that's the trigger. And so this is when you've got your thing, your ray lined up, and then you pull the trigger, and then it'll take you to whatever you want to see. So in this one, we do have text explaining that the sample gates put in 1987, and then we have the left plaque and the right plaque, and then a sketch that was done before they were put in. And you can see that dot. When you're first in there, you're like, ooh, that's really small. It is, so it's a little bit small. So choosing your camera really depends on, I don't think it's always what you prefer, right? It's sometimes what you have available to you and what your budget is. And that being said, I think there's a new Ricoh Theta out, like a Ricoh Z, that's even higher resolution. So again, maybe you wouldn't have to spend that same thing. We also, if you're an IU person, we can make available our equipment to you, and so we can talk about like how that might work if that's something that you need. And then planning accordingly, like before you go out, just so that you know what you want to capture. We did have a back and forth. I don't know how many times I sent you back out to capture some of them. Yeah. Yeah, lighting is like, there was one where like, it was the only building that was like in full shade, right? And it's just like, I mean, that happens, you know, when you're out and you're capturing. And so just, you know, like anything else, it's gonna probably take trial and error. So this is a tour of Versailles that I thought was sort of a good example. And again, you can see this is sort of up and it has these like questions. And again, if you're in something like Google Expeditions, a lot of them are meant to be educational, which is so Tour Creator can now publish to Expeditions. Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of things you can go sort of view, but this is the tiny URL for our limestone tour. If you want to go see it, and obviously if you want to have help from us, feel free, but why don't you, everyone who's in the room, after we see if there are any questions from our online folks. Okay, or do we have any questions before we sort of say goodbye to the online folks and start playing? Okay, if you have questions, you can figure it out. Okay, so thanks online folks. We are gonna actually put on some headsets. Wish you were here. Okay, one. There is. Well, I don't know. Oh, no, there's not. So Oh, no, they had HTC Vives. Yes. So there. Okay. So the question was: is there a place to get headsets or check them out? So there are reality labs on campus. There are a couple of them. The most accessible that doesn't have classes in it all the time is here in the library on the 4th floor of the West Tower. There is also one in Maxwell Hall that after 5 o'clock every day doesn't have classes in it. And I think there are like 8 Vives in there. Fine Arts has some. We have a Franklin. Gosh, why am I saying that? Franklin, Maxwell. No, thank you. And then Matt made a map, I think, of all the places that there are reality labs. So the as far as cardboards go, if you want to talk to us about what your needs are, we can sort of figure that out. But they aren't, like most folks just buy, because they're 20 bucks each, they just buy a couple. Yeah. Oh, okay. So Leanne Ney, who is a librarian here who's really invested in the sort of maker culture, has some, and I don't know, maybe they're also possibly available for checkout. Or she could, but her last name is N-A-Y, her first name is Leanne. And we just got our Oculus Go's 2 weeks ago, so we are still experimenting. You know that. How much is the jump? Is it a lot? Mary was asking about things that are between the views and the 360, because the views cost how much? 700? And did you not like the quality of the pictures? Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. So let me look at the jump, because yeah, it's like that's a really big jump. Come for the information, stay for the bad jokes, bad buns. Yeah, I think there's a lot of these things that are happening quickly. Like I think prices will drop on them, but yeah. And like I said, I think the Ricoh is actually really kind of gotten some really great stuff. So in terms of resolution, so. Yep. Yes. I think it is monoscopic because there's only those two. So a Ricoh Theta, if you remember the picture, there is a lens on the front and a lens on the back, so it can't truly be monoscopic. Yeah, I was gonna say you normally bust it out of like your backpack. So stereoscopic, what Mary's question was, is it monoscopic? And the difference between the two is sort of this true 3D, right? Being able to offset the eye. It comes from the, the question was, does the stereoscopic come from the headset or what you're recording? And so it depends on the affordances. So the recording needs to be in stereoscopic. So like there's actually a new thing called a cave cam that Ed has been helping us with, Ed and Margaret. And we have these pictures of Luxor that we could also pull up we can bust out the glasses if you really want. So it uses a GigaPan robot, which normally gets you really, really high def photos. And so it has 2 mirrorless cameras side by side. And like the detail of these, so we showed at this digital Egyptology class, and the pictures of Luxor are like amazing. They're just, I think they're totally incredible. And I don't know how much that rig cost. Yeah, I think it's over 10 grand. Yeah. But that ability to zoom in is also like part of, so you can't do that on poly, right? So again, you're just gonna think about like what's really important to you about the outcome for the tour, who's your audience, how much time are you gonna put in, what's your technical know-how, right? There's that whole matrix of issues, so yeah. Other questions? Okay. Bye, online people.